If you've ever been told, renting is throwing money away, this might be the most important housing video you watch this year, because that sentence is usually bad math. In many cities, renting can build more wealth than buying, even if home prices go up. I'm going to show you the framework, the numbers, and one ratio that settles the rent versus buy debate faster than any opinion ever could. Quick disclaimer: this is educational, not financial advice. Housing is the biggest expense for most people, and if you get this decision wrong, you don't just lose money, you lose flexibility, you lose years, and you lose options. Let's start with the emotion, because housing decisions are never purely logical. Picture a dinner party. Someone asks you casually, "So, are you still renting?" And there's that tiny silence right after, the kind that implies renting is a phase, like you're behind, like you're not a real adult yet. That's not finance, that's culture. Now meet Henry. How's poor Henry? Henry follows the script. He buys a home, he signs the deed, he's beaming. Everyone shakes his hand like he just achieved something permanent. Fast forward 6 months. Henry is eating instant noodles in a mostly empty living room. Because furniture costs money, moving costs money, closing costs cost money, and now he's a homeowner. Then a pipe bursts, cha-ching, $500. A property tax bill arrives, cha-ching, $4,000. Then Henry checks his mortgage statement. He paid $3,000 this month, and the line that says principal paid is $412. He doesn't even scream out loud. He just stares at it like it's personally insulting him. And here's the part nobody warns you about. They told Henry rent is throwing money away, but buying has its own version of rent. It's just hidden. So let's define throwing money away correctly, because that phrase is doing a lot of damage. The real concept is unrecoverable costs. Money you pay that never comes back no matter what. Rent is unrecoverable, sure, but buying has unrecoverable costs too. Most people compare rent to a mortgage payment. That's the wrong comparison. The correct comparison is rent versus the homeowner's unrecoverable costs, plus what you could have done with the cash you tied up. If you buy a house, you basically get 3 invisible landlords. 1, the bank. Mortgage interest is rent, you're renting money. 2, the government. Property taxes are rent. You're renting the land and the services tied to that land. 3, entropy. Maintenance is rent. You're renting the condition of the house, because roofs wear out, water heaters die, appliances age, and the universe is undefeated. So here's a quick myth bust. If you buy and your unrecoverable costs are high, you're still throwing money away. You're just throwing it away in 3 categories instead of 1. And this is why I say it this way: a house is a consumption choice, not automatically an investment. It can be a good investment in some markets at some prices with some time horizons, but treating it like a guaranteed wealth machine is how people overpay and get trapped. Wealth is built by minimizing unrecoverable costs, whether you rent or buy, and investing the difference into productive assets over time. Now let's get mathematical, because this is where the debate ends. The cleanest metric for rent versus buy is the price-to-rent ratio. It's basically the P/E ratio of housing. The formula is simple: home price divided by annual rent. So if a home costs $500,000 and renting a similar place costs $2,500 a month, annual rent is $30,000, and the ratio is 500,000 divided by 30,000, which is about 16.7. Now, rough rules as a starting point. Under 15, buying tends to be more attractive. Around 20, it can be close, depends on assumptions. Above 20, renting is often mathematically superior. And at 30, buying is usually a lifestyle choice, not a wealth play. Here's a pattern interrupt. If the ratio is 30, you're not wasting money by renting. You're living in a very expensive asset for a relatively cheap monthly cost compared to what it would cost to own it. In a weird way, refusing to buy at that valuation can be the disciplined move. Let's put numbers to it. City A, home price $300,000, rent $1,800, annual rent $21,600, ratio about 13.9. City B, home price $900,000, rent $3,000, Annual rent $36,000. Ratio 25. In City A, buying might be financially reasonable. In City B, buying might be a luxury purchase. And renting might be the wealthier move. And this is where the cultural script messes people up. People say, but real estate always goes up. Or, rent is dead money. The ratio doesn't care about slogans. The ratio cares about price versus cash flow. Now let's talk about the cost nobody feels monthly, the down payment and the opportunity cost. When you buy, you often lock a big chunk of cash into the walls. That cash is not easily accessible without selling or borrowing. It's not liquid. It doesn't pay your bills. It just sits there, trapped. This is what people call dead equity, not because it's useless, because it's stuck. Example. Henry buys a $500,000 home and puts 20% down. That's $100,000 gone from his liquid life on day one. Yes, he has equity, but he can't pull it out to fix a car or cover a layoff or take a job opportunity in another city without creating more debt or selling the house. Now compare Henry to Sarah, smart Sarah. Sarah rents a similar place. She doesn't lock $100,000 into a down payment. Instead, she invests it in a diversified way that fits her risk tolerance and time horizon. Low-cost index funds are one common example people use for broad diversification. But the bigger point is consistency and long-term compounding, not chasing anything flashy. Quick reality check: markets go up and down, and nothing is guaranteed. But over long periods, diversified equities have historically had higher expected returns than cash sitting idle. And real estate, it can do great in certain cities, especially with constraints on supply, but housing is local and long stretches of meh happen too. The point is not stocks always win. The point is opportunity cost is real. If Sarah invests that $100,000, and she also invests the monthly difference if renting is cheaper than owning in her market, compounding can do a lot of heavy lifting over 10 years. Meanwhile, Henry is paying interest, taxes, and repairs, and he's cash poor even while he's building equity. Now there's another advantage renters often have that doesn't show up in the monthly payment comparison: mobility. In the modern economy, one of your biggest assets is your ability to move for a better job. Homeownership adds friction. Selling a house isn't free. Agent commissions, closing costs, staging, repairs often add up to something like 6 to 10%, depending on where you live and how you sell. Here's the pattern interrupt. Those transaction costs can wipe out years of equity building if you don't stay long enough. Example. You buy a $500,000 home. A few years later, you sell for $550,000. Sounds like a $50,000 gain. But say selling costs are 8% all in. 8% of $550,000 is $44,000. Now your gain is $6,000 before maintenance, before taxes, before interest, before the fact that you needed a place to live the whole time. Now compare that to renting. A renter can often leave with 30 days notice. That flexibility isn't just emotional freedom, it can be financial. Because if renting lets you move for a $20,000 or $50,000 raise, that income increase can dwarf the equity you would have built while staying anchored. And that brings us to the big question: what happens over time if the renter invests the difference? Let's run a simplified 10-year simulation, just example numbers to illustrate the mechanics, not a promise. Owner buys a $500,000 house. Over 10 years, the house appreciates to $650,000. Sounds great, but along the way the owner pays mortgage interest, especially heavy in the early years. The owner pays property taxes annually. The owner pays maintenance and repairs. And those costs are unrecoverable, they don't come back. Now renter rents a similar house. Instead of tying up the down payment, the renter invests the down payment money and also invests the monthly difference between renting and owning, if renting is cheaper in that market. Over 10 years, that portfolio can grow substantially through compounding. Here's the twist that shocks people. Even with the house appreciating from $500 to $650, the owner's home equity might be far less than you think. because early payments go mostly to interest, and because unrecoverable costs quietly drain cash the whole time. In many plausible scenarios, the renter ends up with a portfolio worth more, something like $800,000, while the owner's equity might be closer to $300,000 after 10 years, depending on the loan payoff and costs. And there's a second twist: the renter is liquid. The owner can be asset-rich, cash-poor, meaning the owner has wealth on paper but feels broke month to month because the house eats cash. So let's bring it home. Renting is not automatically throwing money away. Buying also has unrecoverable costs: interest, taxes, maintenance. The real question is, which option burns less money for you to live your life in your market at today's prices? Run your price-to-rent ratio. Under 15. Buying can be attractive. Over 20, renting often wins mathematically, and very high ratios usually mean buying is a lifestyle choice, not a wealth hack. Don't ignore opportunity cost. Money locked in walls can't compound elsewhere, and it can't help you in an emergency without creating more debt. And don't ignore flexibility. Renting can buy you optionality, and optionality can be worth more than equity. Final thought. The American dream isn't a deed, it's freedom. Don't let a cultural script guilt you into a 30-year debt contract you can't comfortably afford. Run your own numbers, minimize unrecoverable costs, and invest the difference in ways that fit your risk tolerance and time horizon. If this helped you think clearly about rent versus buy, subscribe. And if you calculate your price-to-rent ratio, drop it in the comments with your city. I'm genuinely curious what the math looks like where you live.